business of. Today with our guests, we're going to be talking about the business of being inclusive. This podcast is brought to you by the Spokane Public Library and recorded in their video studio at the Central Library, and it's a partnership between the Spokane Library and Emmett Build Consulting and Development. And really quick about our company, we are a group of business doctors or business consultants. This podcast started on from a very simple idea, is that we're all tired of workshops, and we wanted a less rigid format, and also I'm a very lucky guy and I'm surrounded by a bunch of really, really interesting and smart people. Some of them are consultants, some of them are subject matter experts, some of them are activists or leaders in the community, and we thought that all these conversations that are happening backstage should be brought to you. So that's what we're doing today. And we're going to start with like a quick intro, and I would like each one of you to tell us who you are and what's how your work is connected to inclusion. Do you want to start?
Sure. So my name is Tamika LaMere, and I'm an enrolled tribal member with the Little Shell Tribe of Chippewa Indians. And my work is connected to inclusion. So I feel like my day-to-day, so my career is definitely connected, and my community work. So what I do outside of work, and just I feel like my experience just as an individual is connected for sure.
Okay. And I feel like you're shorter a little bit. Like I know you had like 20 different roles in the community, but you just gave yourself one here.
I mean, yes, I wear many hats.
You want to say a couple more?
Well, I currently work for Spokane Public Schools, and I am with Native Education, and I also, so in my spare time, I do feeding and just other things, so yeah.
Okay, awesome, thank you.
You're welcome.
Alethea?
Hi, I'm Alethea Dumas. I, as well, wear many hats. I am in the nonprofit world, specifically just working with a buy-in for organizations and amazing just leaders here to just help support and advocate everything that is necessary when we talk about equity, inclusion, and just providing the resources that people need, specifically Black, Indigenous, and people of color, as well as LGBTQ plus populations as well. I think through that I've been able to also facilitate, hold spaces, make spaces for healing amongst the Black community, as well as buy-in for people who just are on the front lines, whether it's helping people in the hospitals or through education, just been able to facilitate spaces for not just people who are in need, but also for the healers, the people, the leaders that are constantly, I think, giving of themselves to honor people.
Right now you're with Better
Health Together,
okay.
Yes.
And what's your role with them?
Program manager.
Okay.
For equity and community engagement. So, yeah, definitely through that work I've been able to be heavy in the community and specifically serving my people. So
Awesome, thank you. Esteban.
Yeah, so my name is Esteban Herevia. My pronouns are he, they. Like everybody else, I wear a lot of hats. Whether I like it or not, I don't know yet. So during the day, I'm the strategist for health justice and belonging at the WSU Elson S. Ford College of Medicine. Basically, my job is directing and taking a look at what are we doing to address social determinants of health. How are we confronting and connecting anti-racist education into medical education? And really, what are the bones that the foundation, how can we set the ground for health justice and health equity for each of us? At night, I guess at night, also during the day, I serve as the president and CEO of Spokane Pride. So I direct the organization that puts on the annual Pride Parade and Festival, and through that I get the opportunity to do competency workshops and a ton of speaking engagements, meeting with folks one-on-one, really just helping folks increase their understanding in gender and sexual identity, but also how do we love on people and what does that look like in real time.
And I
it's
think-
a very cool life.
Yeah, and I think just because you're mentioning Pride, like you went from small Pride to massive Pride. Do you have
massive Pride.
numbers to share? Like, I don't want to put you on the spot.
Yeah, it's wild.
Like-
So in 2017, the Pride here in Spokane served about 11,000 folks, which was pretty big for the city this size. In 2019, before the pandemic, we were serving around 27. And then when we came back this last year, it was 50,000. So,
They
didn't
so technically, Spokane Pride is one of the 3 top largest events in the city of Spokane. And I need to still do the study, but if we did an economic impact study, we could also
Yeah.
pretty much say that Pride is also one of the top 3 income or tax
Tax.
earners for the
Absolutely.
weekend in
Mhm.
Spokane. So it's impact. I think
Yeah.
folks underestimate the impact that Pride
Yeah,
has.
and I don't mean to take the conversation
No.
on a tangent, but it's so interesting that like people don't realize, communities don't realize that inclusive is also a business model.
Mhm.
It benefits everybody
Absolutely.
in the community, and I think what you're talking about
Yeah.
is a very tangible proof. And since you were talking, do you want to talk a little bit about how your approach to inclusion was informed, both your expertise, your experience, wherever you want to go with that, and then I'll ask the two of you as well. And feel free to jump in. Like,
I think it's important for me to acknowledge how I grew up.
Mhm.
So my parents are pastors, my grandparents are pastors, like the whole line of folks are all pastors, and so we grew up in a worldview that said that we were all God's children and that there was no difference amongst us. And as I've come to know the world, I know that sentiment isn't true. I'm not saying that it's bad, but I think it's important for us to recognize that yes, we all are created and we all have the opportunity to live full lives, but that the reality is systems, politics, society, culture has dictated a sense of who belongs and who doesn't. And so for me, as I've kind of journeyed through the world and as I've had these experiences, I've really come to learn that like my role here on this earth is to advocate for the least of us, to ensure that we have the most for each of us. And really, what really solidified that has been my time in higher education. One of the best bosses I've ever had in the world, and I think we're going to talk about a case study, and I'm going to talk about her as the case study, but it didn't really click until I saw her in action. She's one of the smartest, brightest people I have ever seen. Woman could turn out policy like nobody's business. She could come up with the actual solutions to end world hunger. And like, she's one of those people who could do that.
That's really cool.
But the way that she was valued by the institution was as if she was just a janitor. That they would pay. She had the most experience, would do the most for the institution, and would be the most underpaid. Was the most underpaid senior administrator. And why was that? Because she's a black woman. And it took me a long time to really see it play out and in action and realize like this whole system is screwed up. And as much as we want to say that we value the best of our employees, it was very hard to sit there and go like, this is your best employee, why does it not? And to hear folks say, well, it's connected to the mission and all this other stuff, and just to see it unfold and be like, it's a bunch of crap.
Yeah, it's a nice poster.
Yeah.
But that's it.
That's it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Alethea, Tamika, how was your approach to inclusion informed?
Yeah, I mean, I think add on to everything that Esteban said, I feel like, I mean, being a black woman, right, I think in a lot of ways I have been I've experienced, right, where this idea around inclusion like really is like hiring, right, like the one black candidate, right, or the one brown, right, or the one Native American, right? And so I think for me, it's really what I've been learning more and more is that it's about really like pushing beyond, right, just the hiring the quote unquote token person, right, but how are we actually applying inclusion in like every aspect, right, of how organizations are working, how businesses are working. And so this thing called like what is equity in process, right? That's kind of how I view it. Like you can invite me to the table, right? But it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm like invited to the party or that I can stick around and play a role in like how things are being played out, or what's being served at the party, or who's invited to the party, who gets to benefit from the party, who gets to network, who gets to leave with certain resources or networking, or
who gets stuck cleaning it up,
right, who's
not at the party,
right and like who gets to leave with like relationships, like things that they can leave with that can help them continue to thrive, right, and like be who they want to be, right?
It's true that, to your point, I think like as a consultant, what we witness pretty often is that inclusion is a separate box. We're like, well, why is not inclusion part of everything else? And I think that's what you're...
Yeah, because people focus so much on diversity and equality, right? And and that's nice, but it's not the like actionable, like everyday kind of things that we like need to actually make sure that people are seen and that they're like heard, and it doesn't bring value to the humanity of people that look like us. So
awesome, thank you.
Yeah.
Tamika, how about you? Like what informed your expertise?
So similar to Esteban. So my growing up, right, and being an Indigenous person, and with the other things that come along with that, and then going to school. So I went to college and I got a bachelor's in sociology, and I was very invested in sociology, and and history, both of those things. And with that, I learned so much about the different movements that went on. And because for me, I really feel like we cannot understand where we are today and why things are the way they are today if we don't have that historical context. And we need to have that, especially for the impacted groups that we have issues today. So what does that look like, and what those experiences were, and how does that relate today? That definitely has had a huge impact, and it has informed my practice in all kinds of ways. And I would encourage anybody, like, I feel like that needs to be their, like, one of their first steps, not just learning about who they are, because that is huge. We got to know who we are and where we come from, and what is that history, and really having a solid understanding of that. And so then I went on to social work and got my master's in social work. And so just that education really helped me create a foundation of understanding. And then now I am, a professional, and and I have a career, right? And so that experience, because you learn about these things, but like, what does that actually look like right now? How is it impacting people right now? And how can I, with my experience growing up and just as I am, just period, in the world, with all that other information, how do I use that to promote, activate, and sustain change that is needed? And I appreciate what Alethea had said about you know, because there's different levels to this, right? So it's like, who do we serve, right? That's kind of the basic. And how are we using an equity lens on who we serve? But then it's like, okay, well, who are the staff, right? And so now we're looking at this multi-dimensional piece, who we're serving, who is the staff, and you need to take it beyond that, right? So who are the board of directors? Who are the people that are making the decisions? Do these people reflect the people that are providing the programs and the services, and what does that look like? And then, and again, how do we just continue to expand that? So for me, it's a continuing, evolving process, that, because our world is changing so fast, continuously, and so how are we, our demographics continue to change, and some of our institutions, the people that work there don't reflect that, and so how do we keep up with that, and how are we staying informed and evolving in our practice, because this has to be fluid, it's not static, and so just making sure that I'm continuing to learn, I'm continuing to be open-minded, I'm continuing to collaborate, and just I don't know, I just know it just doesn't stop.
Right.
So, yeah.
It's an ongoing battle.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so like, yeah, we're talking about case studies and I mean, I don't know, it's kind of like a very cold word, but like personal, professional experiences that you've had with organizations, and I want to say, like, the reason why I thank you very much for all three of you for being here. It's like I really wanted to step out of the scenario, like, hey, let's educate a bunch of like white people who are well intended but like don't know anything. Really, what I think is really interesting is that you're all in positions where you're leading, like you're in there, you're leading the battle, you're having an impact on the community, and that's, I think, where I would love to learn from. And so your best experiences, and also like worst experiences that you've seen, like best and worst practices. Would you mind sharing a little bit about that? Like, because the idea is that it does have an impact. It has a huge impact. So you were talking, for instance, about this person that was almost like a model for you, or
yeah. I mean, yeah. I'm looking at. So I guess in terms of like the business of inclusion, in terms of hiring practices, and what it looks like to employ us, right? So this person, just to give you a sense of what their role was, they were a vice president of a department, and they had compliance within that department. And when we're talking about compliance, we're actually talking about like federal compliance. So there was standardization that needed to happen. But then whenever there was a mess at the institution, they would be the first person called. If there was a problem that the top administration didn't want to deal with, they were the first person that was called. If people didn't understand new compliance that was coming out, it was their responsibility to interpret that compliance to everyone else. I mean, there was major things that were outside of their role that they were being asked to do, because they understood and they were the smartest person in the room. And there was so many instances, unfortunately, where this person would get called into the room, and year after year, they would go before salary review, and they would be told, well, it's not your time. It's not yet. Mm-hmm. And there was one specific moment where, and I'm gonna talk mess. So, this is me putting the sign up that I'm gonna be held accountable for these words. We were working at a Christian college, and the chapel got $1 million boost in their budget, and we got cut $100,000 in hours. And that $100,000, when we took a look at it, like it got moved around. And the leader, the administrator, continued to be like stacks of G's behind everybody else in their pay, and yet they were the one being asked to do the majority of the work. And sadly, the leader was a black woman, and she had the credentials, she had the experience, she had all the things. Like, you could put her against any other candidate. This is how intense it was. The lawyer would have to come. The university lawyer would have to come to her and talk to her to interpret what was happening in real time. Like, the lawyer would have to come and consult with her because she just got it. That's how much she understood it. And at the time I thought like she was being very gracious and like, you know, she's being very kind, but looking back at it, I'm like, they took so much advantage of this person, this woman. It was giving so much to the organization. And so I think just kind of learning and saying like, I wish I could communicate to her how much I valued her, how much she instilled in me. Like, she's the reason why I got to the point where I am now. She taught me everything that I know. She was very kind and gracious enough to throw me into situations where I had to think critically. I had to really understand what was happening and understand context and movement, and she was also taught me how to investigate, how to mediate. Like, she made sure that if I was gonna work with her, that I knew what was going on. And I think for me, I just look back at institutions and how many other folks that story is real. When we take a look at medical colleges, for instance, most institutions have a DEI person or diversity, equity, inclusion person, not even at 50% of their time. And so you have these major medical institutions that are sending out doctors that don't even have full committed staff, like staff time, administrative time, whatever leadership time that's dedicated to any of this work. And so it doesn't surprise me that we continue to see doctors go into the systems and continue to offend communities and hurt people and perpetuate the harm. And we're very fortunate at our institution that we've got 4 full-time folks dedicated to the work, but it's unheard of.
No.
Because people don't understand, they think that it's a game, they think that it's, like we said, like it's a checkbox, it's a side thing, when in reality, like, these are people's lives at stake.
Well, like the person you're talking about,
Yeah.
her life was directly
Yeah.
impacted. Like,
Impacted. Oh, 100%. And
it's just one person.
The and I would say this much: the institution could not have survived without her.
Mm.
And I don't take that. I don't say that lightly. I don't want to make light of her story and the situation, but also, like, I'm surprised that the institution continues to persist as much as it has without her leadership there. And it's so sad that it happens time and time again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. How about you? Do you want to share like some of the worst practices that you've seen? And you go as far as you're comfortable going, but it's interesting, I think, for people to understand how far it goes. And
Yeah, I think just piggybacking off of what Esteban said, it really made me think about we're just gonna keep it real. I think really thinking about the lack of support, right? Like when we're talking about institutions or organizations, right, that are hiring, right, amazing, capable, qualified, right, like Black and brown human beings, right, and that's all great, right, but hiring them to be, working in these systems, right, that really, they weren't set up to support. When I say support, I mean in ways of like professional development, whether it's coaching or mentorship or just even having a safe space, right, for staff, or on any level. I don't care if it's like a program manager to a director to but just having safe spaces to be able to make sure that they are seen and heard, but that nothing is being weaponized, right, against them, and that they're able to contribute in ways that are always authentic, but that isn't going to be, again, like weaponized or used against them for sharing their experiences, right? I think for me it's always interesting how there just always seems to be this like pattern where people are hired, right, for their experiences, right? People are hired for the color of their skin, right, and their experiences, and somehow yet they are weaponized, right, because of them sharing their experiences. And like how, because of their experiences, how it informs, like how, you know, processes maybe should be different, or structures should be better, right? Or just different things should maybe be thought about in a different way, so that we could better support. And here is why, based off of my lived experiences, and how somehow there seems to be always like pushback, and like always this like again, like my experiences being weaponized or used against me in some way, right? Whether it's from leadership or whatever, and you begin to just kind of be like, what? Like, I'm here, and I have a lot to say, and I have a lot to, like, you know, do, and a lot of change that I can make. And so I guess just to piggyback off that, I think it's just my experiences that I've just dealt with, I think, navigating, whether it was school, going to college, but then you know, outside of college, jumping into the world, right, and being in different jobs, whether it was a barista or, you know, working at a store, to like nonprofit world, and like how again you are hired, right, and it is perceived that you're valued, but then when you're actually doing the work and you're expressing, right, and sharing your lived experiences, and like how things can be better to better serve and to better love people, because really that's all I care about, is like loving people, and like how do we do that in a way that's like honoring and centering people. Somehow there's pushback. There's always something, and so it just made me think about just the level in which there isn't a lot of support
I
for
think
us.
a lot of organizations don't even realize they have pushback. Sometimes they do, and it is intentional. I don't know in the case that you described if it was, but sometimes, and it's really interesting, very progressive spaces. We were in a meeting recently. We were consulting for a company that serves mostly like traditionally discriminated population, so Black, Brown, LGBTQ+, the intersection of both, and the whole team and leadership was white, except one person who's Native. And the whole point of the conversation is like, how do we hire more diverse? And then we're coming to that point where we're talking about the language that we should use, and we're like, well, we don't know if we want to use white supremacy or anti-colonialism or, you know, things like that, and the conversation goes on, and at some point it was really interesting. The Native lady, who was not at the top leadership, got really pissed, and she made it known. She was like, you guys, this meetings are messed up. Like, you're here, like, you want to hire more diverse, and the only thing you're centered on is your own experience of the world. And I think sometimes people don't realize, like, they have a good intention, but the impact is really is huge as a blog. And
the intent versus the impact.
Yes,
Absolutely.
Right, and so I would love to hear your experience too about about like worst experiences, like where you see things in action.
Well, I would say the worst thing is just not doing anything, not having any kind of understanding, not even seeing there's a problem, right? And so for me, that's like the worst case scenario.
Did you feel it happens often? Do you see that often? Or have you seen in organizations that play?
I would say we live in an area where that is definitely a thing. I would say I would say
intent
so. Yeah.
is big.
Yes. And so you know, you have you know, proponents of this or proponents of that, or oppose this, oppose that, and the things that we're seeing that are being opposed, right, are things that are would be uplifting to our community, right? And so just ignoring those facts, I think that's the worst thing for me. And you can see that just blanket everywhere.
So that's where DI kind of becomes a posture,
Yeah.
but like the actions are actually taken.
Yes.
Like we're not seeing them.
And I would say the best practices, Alethea's talking about, getting hired, right? And how are we creating the environment and the culture within our organizations that can retain these people, where they feel safe, they feel seen, they have a role to play in a good way, because that right there, because you can hire people all day long, but that doesn't mean that they're going to stay if you're not providing an environment that is cultivating and enabling you to thrive, right? Because how can you thrive and be your best self and show up in a good way if you're feeling stifled, if you're feeling boxed in, if you're feeling unsafe, not heard? Like, you cannot show up as your best self and be creative and be innovative and do just be your best self when you're in that space. And so I think those are like institutional changes that need to be made, right? And so that those structures, yeah,
and I think you're all talking about things that are super important. And again, the reason why I'm so thankful that the three of you are here is that you're on boards, you're in position of management, leadership, and I think part of like some organizations that are involved with economic development or local government or private companies fail to understand sometimes, and I would love to have your take on that. It's that you stop doing roundtables, asking like Black, Brown, LGBTQ plus what they think about something, and then a whiteboard is going to execute it. You want to change organizations, you want to change the culture, change the leadership, and then everything will cascade through an organization. And do you see that changing? Do you all see that changing, or are we still stuck in time?
I see it.
I'm so glad you see it.
I see it. I see it. And it's small incremental changes, and I know because of the history and what that's been, it is big, and we need to celebrate that. Because I feel like we discount the work that's been done and continues to be done right now, when we don't acknowledge that, because we know there's so much more work that needs to be done, right? We're not where we need to be. We know that. And we cannot validate that. Like, we have to validate the work that has been done and the changes that have been made, and the people that are still continuing to do that. Like, we cannot ignore that, because that just invalidates all the work that continues to happen. And that's just not okay with me. So we got to acknowledge that.
Quickly, because there's another couple questions that I would really like to ask you if possible. What are some of the good practices that you've seen? Tamika has shared a little bit. What about you two?
Well, you pay people. Like, we get asked what we think, and you're actually compensating us for that.
Okay.
And not saying that money is everything, but it communicates that you have some sense of worth.
It's a metric in our society. I mean, it's a real.
And we're experts. Like, if you want to really know what it's like to experience racism in Spokane, I just come walk a day with me, and you can experience it.
Yeah, and I think like I love what you're saying here. Like, there's experience and there's expertise, and some people have both.
Right.
Yes.
And it means something.
Absolutely.
And both are valuable, but it means something that you're also experts in topics.
Angelique Tomeo also has something she says often, and I don't want to misquote it, and I also want to make sure that I'm respecting the quote. She says, anything that's good for an Indian is good for anyone. Meaning anything that's good for a Native person is good for anyone, right?
Yes.
Meaning
Great,
anything
such a
that's,
great point.
all of us have access to something good. I want to experience joy and love and beauty just as much as everybody else does. Why can't we create systems in society that allow folks to experience that? I think whenever I find myself in moments where I get the opportunity to feel free, that's where I'm like, oh, this is rare. Like, oh.
I think what you're saying, like, it's something like that sometimes people forget. Like, I remember recently, I don't remember if it was involved in or if I heard a whole argument about the term woke. And someone said, well, let's forget about the term woke. We're talking about basic empathy for everybody to have this kind of experiences that you're talking about. That's all we're talking about.
Right.
We can use the term woke or not. At the end of the day, yeah, we shouldn't have to fight for that.
That's the funny thing about the way that we, like, when we try to weaponize these stories, it's funny to think about, well, why are we weaponizing the story, right? Like, who gains benefit from it being weaponized and who loses when we do that? When in reality, folks are, one of the, I used to think that activism or like loud activists would really, like it really would disrupt me. Like I would feel really shaken, right? When somebody would kind of be like, you. And then it took me recognizing that somebody was imagining an ideal situation, and what they were trying to do was communicate that ideal situation. And I think when I had that shift in my mentality of like, here comes Natasha Hill yelling at me, and I'm like, why is Natasha yelling so much? Like, why can't she just like talk to me? But then it, with that framework, understanding that when someone like Natasha Hill is yelling, what is she trying to communicate? What is she saying? And when I realized, and this was a long time ago, so I'm digging back into work that happened 10, 12 years ago. But when I recognized that someone is yelling at me because they're trying to communicate something so boldly, there is an element of like they see a world that I can't see. So how do I take on what they're saying? That's some good practice when we're recognizing that folks aren't coming, when there's a complaint, folks aren't coming to us to complain or to call it, like they're seeing a world or they're imagining a world that either has something that we need to fix or they're imagining a better version of it. How can we invite those people in to imagine a better version together?
Alethea, do you want to share a little bit about some of the best practices? And then there's one important question that to ask all of you.
Yeah, I think I think a simple practice that I've been able to experience is just like really just like pausing when you are. I think specifically, I think the work that I do, like, and just I think nonprofit world in general, it's very. I just feel like things are always happening. There's so many things going on. There's so many moving parts. There's so many great ideas and like so many big picture. Like we want to do this, we want to do that, which is all great, right? But like again, equity and process, right? Thinking about like, okay, how can we achieve the big picture, which is whatever that is. Like, how can we better serve, Black people, Indigenous people, right? Like LGBTQ plus people, big picture, right? But these are the things that we want to do, cool. But how do we like stop and pause and go, okay, how are we making sure that the like process to like get to that point, who are we bringing to the table? Who are we getting feedback from? Are we even, reaching out to the community to see if they even want our help or support, right? Are we like seeking out to see what is actually needed, versus just doing something that is that like looks good and sounds good and like feels good, right? So I feel hopeful that I've been seeing more organizations really pause and like go like, okay, how do we do things in a way that is really honoring the people that we say that we want to serve. Like it's honoring the like leaders and like the trusted leaders and messengers, right? And the people who are literally in it, doing it, living it, right, every single day, and accomplishing, whatever it is that we're trying to accomplish.
And it's actually a great transition. Thank you for like a point that all three of you touched on, and I think a lot of people don't realize that it's a really important part of anti-racism work, of inclusion work. you all talked about healing and self-care. Why can you, like, I'm really interested in all three of you telling me why is it an important part of inclusion? Why is healing and caring and
We got 2
and
more hours.
and I know that, like, this is, I know it's a long question, but if you could give me like a little bit of why you think about that as like a key point.
I'm in the midst of it right now. And so how do you, the work is not sustainable if we are not well. And if we're carrying around that hurt and those wounds, and they're just open and just out there, like we can't sustain this work. And how are we able to collaborate with each other and be in community with each other if we're carrying these wounds? And so for me, it's just so important that we may not ever be able to be fully healed, because I don't know if that's even possible. And it's a journey, and you have to at least try to be on it in order to, because this is heavy work. This is not light work. And again, mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, all the ways, like how are we caring for ourselves so we can continue to do this work in a good way with our hearts, leading with love, like you talked about love, and we cannot, I feel like, express that love and do the work together if we are not if we're not in the process of healing or even acknowledging that. So that's for me.
Are you saying that besides the plans on inclusion, besides the milestones, the benchmarks, does it mean like we need to create spaces for people to have conversations, spaces for people to heal, spaces for, what does it look like? What does healing look like?
Okay, so it doesn't look the same for everybody, right? And we are living in a Western world, and so, you know, we are, I guess, in our faces, it's all the Western ways, you know, this type of psychotherapy and these medications and this and that. And what I am learning and reclaiming for myself is those indigenous ways of knowing and being, and how are we connecting with the land, and how does that help heal us? Just reconnecting with our culture and our traditions, knowing the river, taking a walk, like what are the plants and the medicines that grow there, and how are we using those traditional modes of healing? How are we reintegrating that back, or just not even because if you've never knew, it's not a just how are you introducing that into your life? And so for me, that's something that is new, but I'm just very grateful that I'm learning, because it is something that, you know, was taken.
How about you guys? And thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah, I mean, I think similarly, healing is a journey. So I will be doing it the rest of my life, and though it's hard, it is also beautiful at the same time. And so I think for me, therapy has been my best friend. I think coming from and like growing up in a culture or in even like a household where I don't know, just the idea of just expressing yourself, expressing your feelings was so taboo, and so talking about grief, talking about trauma, you know, talking about hard things was just not something that I was taught to do. And so it's really like unlearning a lot of the things that I was taught to do that I recognize was coming and is rooted in a place of survival, understanding that you know, my grandmother, my great grandmother, like it's a generational, ancestral, like these are things that were brought up and utilized to survive, And so understanding my history, like you had said, but also taking that and really unlearning some of the things that are just not true about me as a human being, you know, and really just taking ownership of like it is okay to feel, it is okay to be sad, it's okay to be mad, it is okay to cry, and it is okay to express that. It's okay to be a human being, and I think therapy, along with I love music and I love to sing, so I think utilizing those things, songs, music, therapy, friendships, right? Going on walks, things like that, just like practicing doing things that center me and my needs, whatever that is, and really just giving myself permission, I think, to feel or to cry or to laugh or to whatever it is. I think that's just been my way of trying to continuously like heal, and know that it's not a destination. I think that's really important. I think people, well, I'll speak for myself. I tend to always look for the quick solutions. Like, well, if I just do this, then it'll be good. I don't have to worry about my trauma. I don't have to worry about that. And it's like, nah, girl, actually, like, there's ways that trauma shows up in my life differently. And so how do I be gentle with myself? How do I nurture myself? How do I be present with myself and my feelings as I am growing and evolving and changing and healing and all these things, so that when stuff does come up, I know how to, you know, nurture it.
And I think like one of the things that is interesting that we're all experiencing in organizations, that sometimes, like, you know, organizations are very much about efficiency and producing results and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Then they change the topic, which is, hey, let's be inclusive, and they're trying to still have that efficient mentality, and they don't realize that they still have a very colonial mindset. They just change the topic. And what I'm understanding in what you're saying is that you don't just change the topic, you make room for being, you make room for healing, and so that sometimes it's also very inefficient, and that's okay.
And it takes time.
It's
gonna take time.
It's not about the efficiency or practicality of it.
And you're gonna mess up. Not sorry, but you're gonna mess up. You're gonna make mistakes. You're gonna have hiccups. But that learning is also part of the, like, you know, journey of like healing. Is that you were open to like learning. You were open to being told like you were wrong or you messed up. You know, you hurt my feelings, or you know, this made me feel this way. How can I grow and be better and love you better, right? Or you know, treat you better. So
yeah, I think we're all in the, I like saying that lately, we're all in the business of having uncomfortable conversations.
Yes.
And it's okay.
Yes.
It's like, Esteban, what's your take on that? And then we'd like to see, do we have also a couple questions or one? Okay.
Affirm everything that they say. The other thing I want to add on is, now that I find myself in positions where I'm like leading organizations and working with folks, that it's also my responsibility to make that healing accessible to folks. So I have a very distinct laugh. And you can hear me laugh from a mile away.
That's true.
And I hate to say it, but very white spaces are very quiet. So when I start laughing, you can find me in the building, right?
Yes.
And now imagine if you get me and the rest of my family together into one room. You can't. You're gonna be disrupted, right? Or you're gonna perceive disruption based off of our laughing and our joy and whatever else is happening. That's a pretty common experience for people of color, right? Where you get us into one room and next thing you know, there's just laughing and all the noise. And so what I try to do is to practice making the healing space as accessible as possible. So if you're working with me during Pride, like for instance, the office is never quiet. I don't want the office quiet. I need music. I need Beyonce blaring in the background. I want to make sure that folks feel comfortable. I make sure that there's hot Cheetos and all kinds of candies. Because I want folks to feel like they can bring in their own stuff or do whatever they need to do to make the space as their own. Because the reality is, like, for LGBTQ plus folks here, the majority of them have never had a space that has affirmed their identity. They most likely never worked with the leader or with a person who has actually used their pronouns in a way that is respectful. The reality is that they probably have also experienced discrimination within the workplace or have experienced some sense or they lose a sense of safety in the workplace. So when they come to volunteer at an organization like Pride, why am I going to continue to build an environment that replicates the very spaces that harm them? I need to be creating a space where people feel safe, where they feel loved, where they feel like they belong, and where they can heal.
I appreciate that so much, because I know you have to move on, but real
That's
quickly
cool.
I want to say, like, they talk about self-care, and that really is implying that it's the responsibility of you to care for yourself, which yes, and
it's and.
how is this institution organization
Yes.
doing that, supporting this for me as well?
So
So
it's
I
accessible.
love that,
Yeah.
like, and I appreciate that so much.
No, and a couple things I think I saw a post recently, like a few months ago, where you said, like, using, I think it was about pronouns, where you said using pronouns is not about thinking the way you want to be treated, it's about thinking the way they want to be treated.
Yeah,
And
it's
like,
shifting,
there's like this shift,
to the
it's
platinum
so.
It's the golden rule?
to the platinum role.
Platinum rule.
There we go.
That's what it is. The
Oh yeah, yeah.
platinum rule.
But it's so, like, that
Yeah.
shift is so simple, but like we're all about me, and we're never, like, that lack of empathy is so obvious when you put it this way. And also, and I hope it's okay to mention that, like, we don't know each other personally, but I know Esteban a little more, and I think something that people do not realize is that because you're in a position of leadership or management or on boards or you still experience racism.
Oh,
Like, so the healing is not like a little
oh
gadget.
no,
Like,
and it's not that, like,
we still
become
experience
exempt
it.
once
Yeah,
every
daily.
Of course.
And I'm gonna two bold things. These white gay men will treat me just as bad as
This what?
the white gay men will treat me just as bad as white cisgender men. Like, so there is no safe space, really. I mean, really, the most times I feel the most protected or the most safe are when I'm with women of color, because while I'm not a woman and I don't identify as a woman, a lot of my experience is very similar to theirs, that we have a shared sense of, like, at the end of the day, who's going to get cut in the system is going to be us. So it's almost like we have to stick out for each other, like, be there for each other, and but also, like, the healing that I experience is also tied up in their healing too, and I think we get that shared. Again, I'm not a woman. I don't want to say that I'm here to take up spaces where women, but also, like, I recognize where I'm the most safest too.
But the reality of it, like, if it, like, you were confident, you're in position of responsibility, and it still happens to you. So what does it mean for everybody who is not in position of responsibility, who has, like, who have maybe entry jobs? Like, what does it mean? Like, and it's just so. I think it's really, really important.
It's
to
also the choice,
highlight.
and this is the unofficial contract. The things that we don't get paid for is then it is my responsibility to speak up when it does happen. Because if they don't have the power, if they're rendered powerless, I still have some sense of, like, I can call somebody and be like, hey, this was not right, or I can leverage institutional power to say, like, I had this experience at this place. Please correct the action, or X, Y, Z, whatever.
And I think, like, that all that ties so much into healing. Like there's healing at that level, and it's exhausting. Like, it feels like so much like a weight that's constantly present, and, like, I don't think people necessarily realize that they have their jobs and think they're stressful. They don't have that extra layer.
Thank you for saying that.
And so I think it's really part of the experience that's not. I was going to say it's not recognized. I think it's not even understood. Like,
And they're not explicitly calling it out and talking about it, even in like no. So yeah.
Did we have a question, Alina?
The question is, what have been some of your greatest joys or favorite experiences in the inclusivity space, and having this as a major focus in your life, in your professional life as well?
That's a good question. Yeah, I feel like I feel so fortunate to be able to not just like facilitate healing spaces, but I think just being able to have access, right? We talk about having access to things, but being able to have access to healing spaces that I can just show up in and just be, I think, and like really like take off that like, okay, like program manager hat or leader, you know, like I don't have to be those things in that moment. Like I can just really just be me, like freely without like anything, right? Like no white gate, like nothing. It's just like I get to show up, see familiar faces, right? Some not familiar, but just to look and see people who look like me, you know, and to just express like whatever that is. If it's laughing about something, that's great. If it's crying about something, I can do that, and it's not. There's like no fear of like repercussions or, you know, like I don't have to worry or look over my shoulder or, you know, kind of filter myself, you know, and so I think that's been a result really of just the work, I think, of inclusion and like recognizing that because yes, there has been a lot of great things that have been happening, and I think will definitely continue to happen because of the Estebans in the world and the Tamikas in the world, right? And I think recognizing because there's still so much work to do, and people coming together to like create these accessible spaces, you know, people like me, people like Esteban, people like Tamika, like we're like able to go to places, right, and like access that like freedom or that like healing that we like need. And so I think just the idea of fellowshipping and like being in community with people who just get me without me having to say anything, or even meeting people who don't know me, but it's like they don't have to know me to like embrace me and to see my humanity and to like value me. Like there's something really special about that. Being able to meet people who look like me or who have similar lived experiences but don't know me but still value me and still acknowledge me, right? I've been able to experience that a lot more. I don't know if the pandemic, I don't know, but I just think like through the pandemic and just experiencing just a lot of heartache, I think that a lot of people have been going through, coming to the other side of that, of just being able to have develop more relationships, meet new people, and be in spaces that actually feel safe, has just been such a joy that I like cling on to for dear life. Like I'm like, yes, like I cannot wait for the next time I can join the space or go to this person's house or join this conversation. Honestly, things like this is also an example, honestly, is joyful for me because I get to talk about it amongst, again, people who like have lived experiences, and it's safe, you know, so.
Thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
How about the two of you? Like,
Yeah.
and I know we're a little bit over time, so
Oh yeah, I can make
that's
the Pride movement's gonna persist with or without me. I don't necessarily need to be in this role. I
That's
just am very
awesome
grateful
news.
that I
Awesome.
get to do it. But one of the practices that I really tried to really hone in on these past couple years is always carrying a pride flag on me or a variation of a pride flag, because somebody will always need one. And there's always a moment where I don't know why, but it'll just be in my bag or I'll have it on the travel, whatever it is. And I'll talk to somebody and they'll say, well, I just came out and I don't know. And so then I'll ask, well, do you have a pride flag? And they'll say, no, I don't. And so I can do the like, or like someone transitions for the first time and I hear like, this is the first time you're using a new name. Do you have a trans flag? No, here's a trans flag. So like, I find that in those moments, I'm not gonna get emotional about this. I get the opportunity to really welcome folks into new phases of who they are and where they find themselves in. And so I think those are the moments where I don't take them for granted.
Mm-hmm.
If I take them for granted, then I need to be out of this work. But two, that's exactly what the platform should be doing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think in those moments, like when you get to see that actually play out for the first time, when you get to see somebody feel themselves being realized by somebody else, that's sacred work. That's holy work. That's work that I wish more people understood.
Mm-hmm.
It's really easy to hate, right? It's really easy to make your decision and make your judgment and lay it out and say, oh, I want to feel this way about these group of people. And, it's really easy to do that.
So you have a flag with you today?
Oh, in the car I do. In the car I have flags.
Okay.
But it's even easier to affirm people.
Yeah.
It doesn't take much. And I think everybody's just looking to be affirmed. And so any opportunity I get to do that,
Thank you for sharing that. Tamika, moments of joy?
Oh my goodness, so it's similar to Alethea. Just being able to, whether it's me helping coordinate spaces where we're creating community and we are really focused on the goals and doing the work to serve the communities that we're saying that we're here to do. We're here to do that, and just being a part of those spaces. And you talked about laughter. Fills my cup. I love laughing. And when I can be in those spaces, like when we did the retreat,
That was the best.
So yes, so
So good.
anytime we can come together, community, connected, connection is, I love it today. Anyways, so yes, that's it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. It all reminds me, one of the first questions that I was asked as a consultant was, is there a process for care? And I was like, that's a really interesting question. There are metrics and all that stuff. And then I was like, the first step for process for caring is to actually care. It's and I think that's what you all talk about, right? It's actually caring about what we're talking about. I can't thank you enough for being here today and for sharing your experiences. Thank you to the library. Thank you to the studio team. And very quick, our next episode would be on March 30th, and it will be about the business of transformative cultures. And that would be really cool with Zeke Smith, president of Empire Health Foundation, and the director of Spokane Public Library, Andrew Chance. So you'll find all this on our social media. If you have questions about anything that we talked about today, please feel free to send it to our social media as well, and I'll be happy to forward or make introductions if you guys are okay with that, of course. And thank you so much, and we'll see you on March 30th.
Bye, y'all.